the book of Exodus and also in the book of Deuteronomy, we speak about the mitzvah to destroy and to annihilate the nation of Amalek. Says the Rambam in Mitzvah 188 and also 189 and also in Negative Commandment 59 that there's a mitzvah and a command to wipe out from among all the descendants of Esav, the descendants of Amalek, male and female, young and old. And the Sifri goes on to say, how do we do this today? We remember, which means to remember it verbally, and do not forget it means not to forget it in one's heart. What was so terrible about Amalek? So the Talmud tells us, based on the verses in the Torah, that Amalek was the first one to attack the Jewish people when they left the land of Egypt. And as the Sefer HaChinuch tells us, that it was like a very hot bath. And people were afraid to go into the hot bath. Finally, one person jumped into the hot bath and said, it's not so hot. Even though he himself became burned by going into the hot bath, now that he entered into the hot bath, he, so to speak, cooled off of the bath, and therefore other people were willing to go into that bath also. Once Amalek fought against the Jewish people, who were compared to a hot bath because nobody wanted to touch them. People were afraid of the Jewish people after seeing the 10 plagues that God brought upon the Egyptians and the splitting of the Red Sea. They were untouchable. Came along Amalek and said, it's not so hot, they're not so hot, they're not so great. We could touch them. We might get burned, we might lose the war, but they're not untouchable. Once they had the audacity, the chutzpah, to start up with the Jewish people, now the other nations felt that they too had a right to start up with the Jewish people. So Amalek represents this concept of unbridled chutzpah. And the Chinuch goes on to say, when he explains this commandment, and he says the root of this commandment is to implant into our hearts that any enemy that oppresses the Jewish people are considered to be an enemy against God. And therefore, according to their evil and their cunningness of their plans, so too will be their punishment and their downfall. And therefore we find by Amalek, they wanted to harm the Jews, and they were the first to harm the Jews. Therefore, God tells us we should erase their memory, and we should eradicate them from the face of the earth. Furthermore, what was so bad about Amalek? So it's brought down in the book of Deuteronomy, and we say this every day, that v'yazanei b'cha kol hanechasholam acharecha. What did they do? They surprised us on the road and cut off all the weak people at the back, at the rear. In other words, they were cowards. They didn't attack the Jews from the front. But on the contrary, they went to the rear, they went to the back of the nation. They went to the slowpokes, those Jews that were handicapped, those that couldn't stick up for themselves, that were in the back of the camp, and they sodomized those people. And then they went and they killed those people. So this is Amalek. And therefore the Torah tells us every day we are to remember what Amalek tried to do to us, and therefore to eradicate them. The question is, today there is no nation of Amalek, and yet we have the mitzvah every day to remember what Amalek wanted to do to us and to eradicate Amalek. So how do we understand this on a personal level, and how do we understand this on a level of serving God? This is Pshat. This is the simple interpretation of the mitzvah. What is the remez? Every mitzvah has a general 5 levels. The Pshat is the simple level. The remez is the hint, the drush is the homiletics. Then you have the soid, the esoteric, and also the Hasidic interpretation. What is the remez, the hint of this mitzvah? there's another mitzvah that sounds like Amalek. And that is the mitzvah of Malika. What is Malika? If a person is an ani, if a person is poor, and they cannot afford to bring a lamb or a cow for a sacrifice in the Holy Temple, the Torah says they can bring a turtle dove for a sacrifice. However, says the Torah, you are to know, don't slaughter it from the front like you normally do by taking a knife and to make sure that there's no cracks on the knife. But the way you are to slaughter the turtle dove is that the Kohen is to take his nail and to put the nail and pierce it through the back of the neck, and that is the way you shecht, that is the way you slaughter this turtle dove. And the Torah goes on to say, remember not to sever the head from the rest of the body, to make sure that the head is still connected to the rest of the body. Comes along again the chinuch and says, what is the rationale behind this mitzvah? So the chinuch says something very interesting. He says, because we're dealing with a poor person, someone that has no money, so therefore he is very, very tied down. In other words, every moment is important to him because he has to scramble to make a living, and therefore we should not in any way slow him down. Therefore, when he comes to the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, with the sacrifice, the Kohen does not have to first try to find a knife. Then he has to sharpen the knife and to make sure the knife is kosher. And then he goes and he slaughters the bird. He takes the bird immediately and he slaughters it. Umalak, and he pierces and he severs the back of the neck. And therefore, the poor man doesn't have to wait too long and can right away return to his duties and his work. Number 2, says the chinuch, what's the reason for this mitzvah? Umalak. Says the chinuch, to teach the Jewish people not to be so stubborn. We are called Am Kishei Eiref, we are called a stubborn people. And therefore, by putting the nail into the back of the neck, it's an atonement, a reminder not to be so stubborn. And then he goes on to say, if you have another interpretation, go ahead, because I'm not sure if this is the real interpretation. This is the Remes. This is the Homiletics. It's a hint to the idea of Amalek. What is Drush? The Homiletics. The Rambam says that there are 3 mitzvahs that the Jewish people were commanded to do when they entered into the land of Israel. And they are, number 1, to establish a king for themselves. Number 2, ulahachriz zarei shel Amalek, and to cut off the offsprings of the nation of Amalek. And number 3, the livnais beis habechira, and to build a holy temple. Why these 3 mitzvahs in this order? First, establish a king. Then, number 2, to destroy Amalek. And number 3, to build the holy temple. But from here we see that in order for the holy temple, which is a meeting place between man and God, to be complete, you first need to establish for yourself a king, and number 2, to destroy Amalek. Furthermore, when it comes to the mitzvah of remembering Amalek, we are told zecher. You should remember. How do you spell zecher? So there's a question traditionally how we spell zecher. It's one of the only words in the Torah that we are not sure how to pronounce it. Is it zecher or zecher? Both mean the same. They both mean to remember, but one is spelled with a segel, and one is spelled with a tzedei. A tzedei has 2 dots underneath it, then it's zecher. And if it has 3 dots underneath it, then it's zecher. But both mean to remember. And because we're not sure, we do both. Timcha zecher zecher, Amalek. We read both. So one of the explanations to the 2 or 3 dots is to remind us that this concept of eradicating the nation of Amalek is not only true for the first and the second holy temples, but it's also true for the third holy temple. Even after Mashiach comes, we will still have this mitzvah to remember what Amalek did and to eradicate them. What is Soid? What is the esoteric message of Amalek? So we're told here in the portion of Beshalach, in verse number 16, it says over there, Vayomer, and he said, for there is a hand on the throne of the Eternal, a war for God against Amalek from generation to generation. We see over here that the word case, which means throne, is missing an aleph, to imply that the throne of God is incomplete until we destroy Amalek. And furthermore, the name of God is spelled only here with Yud and Hey, which is half the name of God, and the Vav and the Hey are missing. And that is Amalek. Amalek means Malika, to sever, says the Kabbalah. To sever the Yud and the Hey, which is the first part of God's name, from the second part of God's name, which is Vav and Hey. That is what Amalek did. They severed the name of God, just like one severs the neck of the chicken, or rather the neck of the turtle dove. What does all this mean? So Chassidus comes along and gives light and inspiration into the entire mitzvah of remembering Amalek. Chassidus says that the word Amalek is the gematria of Safek. If you add up the letters of Amalek, Ayin, Mem, Lamid, Kuf, it equals 240. The number 240 is the same number as the word Safek, which means doubt. What is Amalek? Says Chassidus, Amalek represents the concept of doubt. They put a doubt into everything that you want to do. That is why they're so evil. Who is Amalek? Amalek comes from Esav. Esav was a brother to Jacob. So therefore, when Jacob, the Jewish people, want to follow the Torah, comes along Esav and says, hold on, don't take it so seriously. You know, chill out, cool down. I also know the Torah. Esav, how do you know the Torah? What do you mean? Me and your grandfather Jacob were in the same womb together. For 9 months I was in the womb together with Jacob. And I know the Torah. I was raised in the house of Isaac, and I was raised in the house of Abraham. And I studied the Torah, and I'm knowledgeable of the Torah. I know what your Torah says. It's not that I'm ignoramus, but I can tell you, you don't have to take everything so literally. So therefore, chill out. And that is the meaning, karcha baderech, that they surprised you on the way. The word karcha means coolness, coldness. They bring a coldness into everything that is holy and everything that is good and everything that is important. And they put a doubt, maybe you shouldn't do it. Should I go to the shul and daven, or maybe I shouldn't go? Should I give the charity to the poor man, or should I not give the charity? Should I put on the tefillin or not put on the tefillin? This question, should I? That is Amalek. And that is why Amalek is so terrible, and it has to be totally uprooted, because that is the beginning of the downfall of the Jewish people and the entire Torah. Therefore comes along the Chinuch and says, what is the remez? What is the hint of Amalek? Malak. It's the mitzvah to sever the back of the neck of the turtle dove. Because Amalek separates the head from the rest of the body. As the Kabbalah says, that the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, is spelled Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Yud and Hey, Yud is the smallest letter, represents a concept, an idea. Hey represents understanding. Amalek says, look, you want to understand the Torah? Beautiful. You want to know the Torah? Amazing. Torah is a brilliant, brilliant book. But don't make Torah more important than Shakespeare or Edgar Allan Poe or studying Aristotle. They're all wisdom. They're all nice concepts. Keep it in the Yud and the Hey. Keep it up here in your mind. Don't bring it down to your heart, to your emotion, and don't bring it into your action. Because the latter two letters of God's name, the Vav and the Hey, represent midos, emotion, and action, and speech. Don't bring it into speech by learning Torah, studying Torah with your mouth, and don't bring it into action by actually giving charity, or putting on the tefillin, or keeping the Shabbos. So they are Amalek. Amalek severs the head from the rest of the body, the intellect from the emotion. They say keep it cold, don't get emotional about it. And that is why the mitzvah of Malika is you have to do it quickly. The Kohen is told do it with haste, because we're dealing here with an ani, we're dealing here with a poor person. What is a poor person? Says the Talmud, ein ani ela bedas. A poor person is someone that has no knowledge. It's not that you have no money. Money comes and goes. Money means nothing. What is important is knowledge. But the Gemara does not say ein ani ela b'chachma or ein ani ela b'bina. It says ein ani ela b'das. What is das? So Chassidus says chachma is a concept, like the letter Yud. Bina is the letter Hey, it's understanding. Das, which we translate normally to mean knowledge, das, says Chassidus, means application. To take this understanding and apply it. We're dealing with an ani, we're dealing here with a poor man. Why? He has all the knowledge up here, but he lacks the ability to apply it. He knows what he has to do, but he doesn't do it. There's a severing between his mind and his heart. What is the antidote? Haste, to do it quickly, alacrity, with excitement, with joy. That is the way you transform the sin of Amalek, and you transform it into holiness. Through alacrity, through quickness, through joy, through happiness. And therefore, Chassidus is very much into the concept of simcha, that a Jew has to always be joyous. As Baal Shem Tov tells us, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, that a Jew has to always serve God with joy. And now the Alter Rebbe in Tanya has many chapters that he deals with the concept of joy and the sin of melancholy and sadness, and how one should transform and how one can overcome sadness and melancholy. So, what is the mitzvah of Amalek? The mitzvah of Amalek means not that we should literally go now and search out who Amalek is and kill out that person. We don't know who Amalek is today. But yet the mitzvah, as the Rambam says, is for all generations. Because in every generation, every day of our life, we awake with a doubt. Every day of our life there is a kridus, there's a coldness. Should I do the mitzvah or not do the mitzvah? And therefore every day we have to battle this Amalek. Every day we have to battle this doubt. Every day we have to battle, should I do the mitzvah with coldness, or should I do the mitzvah with heat, with warmth, with a geschmack? And that is why the Torah tells us that there are 3 mitzvahs that the Jew has to do when he comes into the land of Israel. Eretz Yisrael, Eretz, the land, says the Medrash, means etymologically a place where you run to do the will of God. So when a Jew enters into Eretz, into the land of Israel, what should he do? The first thing, appoint a king. What does that mean? Accept the yoke of God unconditionally. If you want to or not, do the mitzvah. Even if you do the mitzvah out of coldness, still do the mitzvah. Step 2, destroy Amalek. Now, do the mitzvah with warmth, with excitement. When you begin to do the mitzvah with excitement, then you have the third aspect, the third mitzvah, which is to build a holy temple, a place where you and God will meet. Because God only meets in a place where a Jew does a mitzvah with joy, and he's totally nullified to the will of God. they say that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. Love is passion. Hate could also be passion. So it's really the same thing. However, indifference, coldness, that is the opposite of love. And therefore, if a Jew truly loves God, he cannot serve God with indifference. He cannot serve God out of sarcasm. He has to serve God with this warmth and with this geschmack and with this joy. And that is really, in a nutshell, the mitzvah of eradicating the nation of Amalek. When it comes to coldness, in truth, you can analyze it and say that there are 4 levels to coldness. The first level is like an air conditioner. It's hot, so you put on the air conditioner and you cool down a little bit, but you're still basically warm. A deeper level of coldness is a refrigerator. Now it gets down somewhere between 35, 40 degrees. A deeper level of coldness is a freezer. You take water that till now was a liquid and now it becomes a solid. But then there's even a deep freeze, and that is something which is running water. Even the running water becomes solid and it cannot move. And this is the sin of Amalek, that a Jew, a soul, comes down into the world to be a mahalech, to move and to go higher and higher, and he becomes stymied and he cannot move because he's so cold, he's frozen because of Amalek. But everything that has its aspect in this world has its counterpart in spirituality. So what is the spiritual aspect of coldness? So we find in the famous story of the Markava, which is the chariot, the spiritual chariot. It says over there in the vision of the prophet that on top of the chariot he saw that there was a ceiling that was like a sheet of ice. It was frozen. In other words, the concept of ice, the concept of frozen, is a level which is even beyond this level of Markava, the spiritual chariot of God. And therefore Chassidus says this represents a person that is so connected to God. He is so subservient to God's will that he becomes totally frozen. In other words, that he doesn't make a difference between one mitzvah and the other. He stands straight in total nullification, that is willing to do the will of God unconditionally. He has no will of his own. And therefore, a positive commandment, or a negative commandment, or a big commandment, or a small commandment, or a hard commandment, or an easy commandment is all the same, because he's totally nullified to God. So therefore, when we read the mitzvah of Amalek, and every day we have the mitzvah and the responsibility to remind ourselves of what Amalek wanted to do, this will give us the strength to leave our stubbornness, and this will give us the strength to overcome our doubts, and we will truly serve God with joy. And from this mitzvah we will go to the third mitzvah, the livnois beis habechira, to build the holy temple with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.